Good morning and welcome to the Prado Museum. We're here a couple of minutes before opening to the public for our weekly sessions in English. Thank you so much to our donors for making sessions like this possible. As part of the offerings of the American Friends of the Prado Museum, we ask you to check us out, as well as our sister organization, Fundación Amigos del Museo del Prado, and we look forward to continuing to bring you this programming throughout the year. Today I'm here in room 36 in the Prado Museum, one of the many salas de Goya, Francisco Goya, taking a look at this small but beautiful work of art, the Duchess of Alba and La Beata by Goya. So in this tiny painting, there is a lot of interesting things going on, and it tells a story about an interesting character in the noble life here in Spain in the late 18th century. So we have the Duchess of Alba, whose name she's known as La Cayetana, and she's a really interesting character who had an interesting relationship with Goya as well. And when we look at this painting and what's actually happening inside of it, the interaction between La Cayetana and La Beata is not something that we would typically see. So La Beata means the Sanctimonious, and we see here her maid, Rafaela Luisa Velázquez, who worked with her in her home in the House of Alba. And the interaction that's happening between them is something that I wouldn't say is very typical. We see the noble person, the subject of this painting, depicted from behind, right? We don't even see her face, but she's identifiable based on her curly black hair, and also her playful nature, which she was sort of known for. When we look at this, when I first looked at this painting, to be honest, it looked like sort of a violent scene. What exactly is happening between these two women? But as we take a closer look at this interaction, we can notice that something playful is happening. When we look very closely at the expression on the face of La Beata, we notice she has a little smirk, while at the same time, she's wielding a cross against her boss, right? As if warding her away, as if she's the devil. And looking closely at what's in the hand of La Cayetana, we see a small red element, right? The paint doesn't tell us exactly what it is, but this also tells us a story that's a little bit more detailed about this interaction that's happening between them. So what's in the hand of La Cayetana is an amulet or a talisman made of coral. So coral was thought to have sort of protective qualities, and in early Christianity, this was something that was sort of pushed away as sort of a pagan practice and not supported by the church. But many practices like this, if they're very popular, it's actually easier to sort of include them in a religious practice rather than excluding them. And so crucifixes made out of coral became sort of a popular way of creating protective measures against the evil eye in this case. So we see La Cayetana holding up this coral talisman, holding it in the face of La Beata, almost threatening her with it, while La Beata is sort of warding her back with this cross against her. So characteristic of Goya, in this painting, he's sort of capturing two things at the same time. In one way, he's capturing this sort of playful interaction between La Cayetana and La Beata, who live together in the same house, the nature of their relationship, but he's also making a commentary about society at the time. He's making, having us sort of notice and talk about superstition and religiosity and that interaction between the two. And he's doing it in a really interesting and playful way. In this moment in Goya's career, so this is 1795, he's also at sort of a turning point. At this point, he is the court painter for the royal family, and he's getting commissions from a lot of noble families, including La Cayetana, who's coming from the House of Alba, one of the most important noble families in Spain at the time. But he's doing these commissioned artworks, which are a little bit more serious, while at the same time beginning to play with sort of these political commentaries, making sketches, improvising, and which would later lead him to the works that we see the end of his career and the end of his life. Interestingly enough, his relationship with La Cayetana after 1795 continued. He spent a lot of time in her residence, painted many portraits of her and her family, and there are actually sketches that he created in her residence, which later are the basis of some of the Los Caprichos series that we see later on. I also like to make a comparison of this painting and sort of its commentary about religion and superstition, because those are some of the same themes that he touches on in the black paintings as well. However, the way that he's covering them is very different. In this painting, we see him kind of touching it with humor, versus in the black paintings, these are sort of a darker representation of these ideas. Also, just looking at the painting in a little bit more detail, the way that he's capturing the details on their dresses are in these sort of generalized brushstrokes, but also even taking the opportunity to make little scratches to create texture, and picking a rather neutral color palette as well. We're pretty much in all white, black, and gray with little bits of yellow details, especially on the top of this dress. And we have, just over here in the corner, you can also see his signature scratched into the painting, his name and the date when it was painted in 1795. Now, I wanted to show you another two quick paintings to talk a little bit more about this relationship between La Cayetana and Goya. As I mentioned, they continued to have a friendship after he was working painting her as well as members of her family. Straight ahead, we actually have a portrait of her husband, who died just a year later in 1796. And after that point, Goya was spending a lot more time in the residence and maintaining a relationship with La Cayetana. Obviously, when people spend time together, lots of rumors come up, and there are lots of interesting rumors about the relationship between not only Goya and La Cayetana, but also La Cayetana and other characters in sort of the Spanish noble scene at the time. We have over here these two famous paintings by Goya, La Maja Desnuda and La Maja Vestida. There have been lots of rumors about who is the subject of this painting, and for a time it was thought that perhaps this was La Cayetana. Since then, there are many other theories about who it might have been, another mistress of Godoy, the prime minister at the time. But you can also note the sort of resemblance with the black curly hair between the two. At the end of the day, this tiny painting by Goya is exciting for its way of sort of combining a humorous take on the life of the family in the House of Alba, while also giving us an opportunity to look at Goya's political stance, making commentary about society at the time. Thank you so much for joining me for this weekly session in English. We look forward to seeing you next week.